Diamonds are a great example of how desire has been manufactured. Again, the most important thing to know about diamonds, there's two major myths. The first myth about diamonds is that diamonds are rare, and they're not. Diamonds are really common, and their value does not come from their scarcity. And the 20th century, in fact, has been the story of how diamonds have been restricted from entering the market. The second myth about diamonds is that they're connected in some intrinsic way to love and to marriage and to courtship. And again, this is a story that was created around 1947 when a copywriter at the NWA's advertising agency in Madison Avenue, not far from here, came up with a slogan, "A diamond is forever." And the diamond is forever was an attempt to make diamonds a mass consumer item.
And did you say that now that the diamond is forever has been seen as being the quintessential thing an ad should live up to?
Well, the diamond is forever has been identified by the advertising industry as the most important marketing campaign, the most effective marketing campaign of the 20th century.
So people started saying, well, if I buy a diamond, the diamond means I love you. And the more I spend, I love you that much more. Is that what it was? Yeah.
Well, the campaign actually had two goals.
Okay.
The campaign they wanted for women, they wanted to instill the idea that diamonds were a necessity for marriage and courtship. And for men, they wanted to instill the idea that the bigger the diamond, the greater the love. The problem with that is, what about all those poor, working class people who you want to get in the market, but who can't afford the really high-end ring? Mm-hmm. So they came up with this, it's absolutely brilliant strategy. They came up with the 2-month salary guideline. So it all becomes a relative thing. So even if you're not a millionaire, if you spend 2 months of your salary on a diamond, it shows how much you love the person you're going to marry. It was a brilliant strategy. They managed to convince men, some men, to go into debt to buy these worthless things that they have billions of sitting in warehouses. And De Beers was able to.
And I love you so much, I'm going into debt for you and for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most probably will still be paying off the debt when they get divorced in 2 or 3 years' time. But the other idea
That's the American dream.
You've made me the happiest man in the world. Emily, will you marry me?
How sweet. You like it, so you're putting a ring on it. But have you ever wondered why we put diamond rings on things we like at all?
Oh God, you're gonna tell us the awful truth about engagement rings, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Hi, I'm Adam Conover.
Hey, Adam.
And you may think of the diamond engagement ring as a timeless symbol of love, but it turns out this ancient tradition was invented less than a century ago by the De Beers Diamond Corporation. Before the 1930s, nobody exchanged diamond rings when they got engaged. It wasn't a thing.
Apple, what do you say we get married?
Oh, that's a swell idea, Frank. What do you give me?
Well, I got the shiny red apple.
Sold. Oh, I love you, Frank.
But in 1938, the De Beers Diamond Cartel launched a massive ad campaign, claiming that the only way for a real man to show his love is with an expensive hunk of crystallized carbon. And we bought that shit.
Now, hold on. Looks like if I don't buy you one of these ring dealies, then I'm a tiny pecked pencil neck.
Well, it's on the side of a building, so it's gotta be true.
Well, crumbs.
In fact, every element of the traditional American engagement was designed to make more money for De Beers. How much you drop on that rock?
I don't know, like $4 grand.
Jesus Louises, that's more than your car.
My dad said the rule was 2 months' salary.
Yeah, sorry, dude. That's not a rule. That's just an arbitrary number from an old De Beers ad campaign.
Buy her a diamond worth 1 month's salary. She'll be sure to love you eternally.
Profits are down. Better make it 2 months.
This has gotta be the most successful ad campaign of all time. This is like if in 50 years, people were going,
"Oh, honey, the same thing again?"
Yeah, you know that old rule. Pizza in the morning, pizza in the evening, pizza at supper time. When pizza's on a bagel, you must eat pizza all the time.
Well, it's not like I'm throwing my money away. I mean, at least the ring is worth something.
Yeah.
Actually, diamonds are intrinsically worthless.
I refuse to believe that.
Well, maybe you believe De Beers chairman Nicky Oppenheimer, who once said, quote, "Diamonds are intrinsically worthless."
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
In fact, they're quite common. The only reason diamonds are even expensive is that De Beers has a global monopoly on diamond mining, and they artificially restrict the supply to jack the prices up. But in reality, those assholes have a fuck ton of them.
These are extremely rare.
Pay no attention to that.
Which means that diamond you just blew your savings on has virtually no resale value. That's why De Beers wants you to think a diamond is forever. If you never try to sell it, you'll never figure out how badly you got fucked.
Fine, so what do we do about it?
Nothing. They've got us by the balls. A century of advertising has embedded the idea of a diamond engagement ring so deeply in our culture that even knowing all that doesn't get you out of buying an engagement ring. Seriously, give it a shot.
Okay. Emily, will you marry me? I'm not giving you a ring because the concept of an engagement ring is a scam on the part of the De Beers Corporation. But we could open a joint checking account?
Sorry, dude. I want that rock.
Fuck! Well, thanks, man.
No problem. Join me next time on Adam Ruins Life's Greatest Pleasures when I'll be talking about how puppies only pretend to love you in order to mooch off your food supply.
Who hurt you?
Philip Arnold was born in 1829 in Elizabethtown, a small village in the north of the state of Kentucky. It wasn't legally established until 1797, and it's known because Thomas Lincoln, the father of Abraham Lincoln, was one of the first people who resided there. Arnold was born only 32 years after the establishment of this small Kentucky town, and he lived a fairly simple life. However, not much is known about his childhood or family. Arnold did not receive any education throughout his life, and he lived his entire childhood and early adulthood in Elizabethtown. For some years, he was an apprentice to a local hatter in his small town. In 1846, when Arnold was only 17, the Mexican-American War broke out, which waged on for 2 years. Arnold, a young, eager boy, tired of his simple life in that small Kentucky town, enlisted in the army. The war ended in February of 1848. It was the first war in US history that was fought on foreign soil. The war erupted because the president at the time, James Polk, aimed to increase the USA's territories and focus his administration on expansionist-minded policies. After this war, Mexico lost a third of its territory, including nearly all of present-day California, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. The end of the war coincided with the discovery of gold nuggets in Sacramento, California, which now, due to the recently fought Mexican-American War, was US territory. The gold rush is arguably one of the primary events that shaped US history. The news began to spread all across America, and people came from all over the country rushing to California. By the end of 1849, the American population of California went from 1,000 to nearly 100,000. By 1849, Arnold, fresh out from the war, rushed to California and was among those 100,000 that wished to make his fortune there. We don't know much of his time in California, only that he clearly didn't leave empty-handed and that he didn't stay long during the gold rush. He travelled back to Kentucky and was able to purchase a small piece of land with a farm. He married and eventually started a family. We don't have much information on his private life from 1849 to 1870, and it's unclear what life he led during those 20 years. Some sources claim that he spent these 2 decades in Kentucky leading a simple life with his family on his farm, while other sources state that he spent his time working in mining operations in the West, earning enough money that allowed him to make periodical visits to Kentucky, where his family resided. In 1870, Arnold, now 41 years old, was employed as an assistant bookkeeper for Diamond Drill Co., a local San Francisco company. By November of the same year, Arnold acquired a bag full of uncut diamonds, which he managed to steal from his employer. He mixed these uncut diamonds with garnets, rubies, and sapphires, which he most likely acquired from native Indians in the region of New Mexico or Arizona. That same year, apart from acquiring this small fortune, from the bag of uncut diamonds, Arnold acquired a cunning partner, his cousin, John Slack, whom, like Arnold, had fought in the Mexican-American War and was also among those who had took part in the California Gold Rush. All around the country, after the Gold Rush, another series of similar discoveries were erupting throughout the country. For example, in California it was gold, but in New Mexico and Nevada it was silver. Bankers, investors and miners rushed as news spread of each new discovery, all seeking to claim a part in this small fortune. Around the same time in South Africa, news came of a very similar incident to the gold rush in California, except instead of gold, it was diamonds. Greedy dreamers were soon out looking for diamonds and precious stones in New Mexico and Arizona, hoping to have the same luck and fortune. This frenzy that struck in the minds of people was the perfect circumstance for Arnold and Slack to sweep in and pull off what would be known as the Great Diamond Hoax. In the months that followed, Arnold and Slack perfected their plan. Slack, the more introverted character, played the role of the brains behind the hoax, formulating and calculating each move, while Arnold, the more cunning of the two, had the role of charming their unsuspecting victims into buying into the hoax. The pair's first target was George D. Roberts, a prominent Californian businessman. He was in the type of business that was very shady, as there's no records as to how he managed to gather such a fortune. Roberts was a key player in this intricate piece by the cousins, and he didn't even know it. The cousins used him in order to get business connections to increase the success of their great hoax. They relied on one simple yet perfect strategy. They created a lie or illusion, and thanks to this, Roberts helped them to convince the world. It began one late night in 1871. Arnold and Slack turned up to Roberts' San Francisco office, looking tired as if returning from a long journey. They came empty-handed, except for one small leather bag, which Arnold was holding firmly. They seemed reluctant to give any details to Roberts. However, he continued to ask the men where they came from and what business brought them to San Francisco. At first, the only information Arnold seemed to give to Roberts was that the thing that was inside the bag was of great value, and that they intended to deposit it in the Bank of California. But due to the late hour, they were unable to do so. As the conversation carried on, both Slack and Arnold appeared reluctant to reveal what was inside the bag. But eventually, Arnold allowed himself to apparently and unknowingly reveal what was inside the bag, and he said that it was a large sum of rough diamonds. As the conversation continued, Roberts was affected by the diamond frenzy that had struck the minds of many at that time. Although the details Arnold and Slack revealed were vague at best, they were enough to convince Roberts to act. Arnold, a charming liar, had an intuitive sense as to how Roberts would react to each word he said. They needed Roberts to spread the news of these mysterious two gentlemen who stumbled into his office one late night carrying a bag full of diamonds. Arnold then told Robert not to tell anyone else and made him swear secrecy of what had occurred that late night. Of course, Roberts agreed and then accompanied the two cousins to the door. However, minutes after the door shut behind the two cousins, Roberts broke his promise. He rushed to the phone in his office, and the first call he made was to the founder of the Bank of California, William C. Ralston. Ralston was a legendary financier, known for his success in investing in various companies and always taking home handsome profits. He was one of the investors involved in the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. He also built several hotels around the country. After Roberts got word to Ralston, he quickly called Asbury Harpending, who at the time was in London. Harpending swallowed the bait just as easily as Roberts, and as soon as he heard of the news, he rushed back to America. Arnold and Slack prepared for the second phase of their plan. They had managed to catch the attention of various people, and all eyes were on them. They had to ensure the illusion they created wouldn't fall apart. Arnold and Slack then got in touch with Roberts and informed him that they managed to secure approximately 60 pounds of diamonds and rubies worth around $600,000. Roberts, happier than ever, broadened his horizons and secured even more investors. Meanwhile, this group of entrepreneurs that Roberts secured were thinking of a way to get the two naive miners out of the picture by buying their interests. Initially, Arnold and Slack appeared reluctant to sell their part, all with the intent to further convince the businessmen of the legitimacy of this hoax. Slack finally came forward with a counter-offer of $100,000 for his share. He asked for the first half in advance, and the second after the pair made what they claimed was the third visit to the diamond mine. In July of 1871, with the $50,000, the pair headed off to England to secure uncut gems. Eventually, they secured $20,000 worth of rough diamonds and rubies from a London merchant. Upon their return to San Francisco that same summer, Arnold and Slack contacted the investors and promised to make one last visit to the mine and return with no less than a couple millions dollars worth in diamonds, which they would provide as an insurance policy for the entrepreneurs as a guarantee for their investment. The pair told Harpending to meet them at the train station in Lathrop, California, apparently as they made their way back from the mine. Harpending later described the encounter to a local California newspaper. Both were travel-stained and weather-beaten, and had the general appearance of having gone through much hardship and privation. Slack was asleep, but Arnold sat grimly erect like a vigilant old soldier with a rifle by his side. At the station, Arnold and Slack handed a bag of diamonds to Harpending, who in turn handed them the receipt and closed the deal with the pair. Harpending then travelled to New York to meet with the other investors. Once they were all together, they emptied the bag's contents and admired the pile of rubies and diamonds that lay before them. However, they were not that easily fooled, so they got in contact with a New York City jeweler for the appraisal of the diamonds before they invested any more money. Harpending and some other investors hired a corporate lawyer to handle the protection of their interests, Samuel Barlow, a close friend to Ralston. The group met on October 1871 at Barlow's New York City home to witness the appraisal. Accompanying them were other important contacts who were keen to invest. With all the gentlemen present, the New York City jeweler began his appraisal. Once he finished the preliminary investigation, he assured the gentlemen that these diamonds held an enormous value. At that precise moment, he couldn't say exactly how much, but he said in 48 hours he would have an exact number. The jeweler returned and concluded that the diamonds that Arnold and Slack had acquired only for $20,000 were worth $150,000, completely overestimating their true value. He concluded that the entire sack was worth at least $1.5 million. When the news got back to Arnold, he couldn't believe how he had managed to fool the country's most famous jeweler. Arnold, now convinced that his hoax had been successful, pressed the investors for another $100,000 and rushed back to London to secure more uncut diamonds. This time he purchased more, as he knew that he had to fool Henry Janin, a well-known mining engineer of this so-called diamond field. Due to the cold weather, Janin did not visit the mine until June of the following year. On June 4th, 1872, after a tiresome and confusing 4-day journey on horseback, led by the pair, they finally reached the so-called mine. Upon their arrival, Arnold was extremely specific and gave precise suggestions as to where they should dig. After a few minutes, they began to dig up a few diamonds. After 2 days, Janin ecstatic at the discovery that he was now part of, because apart from his $2,500 fee, he was promised 1,000 shares of stock. Shortly after the majority of the party left, Shack was left behind to guard the site. However, for an unknown reason, Slack left the hoax that he planned with Arnold. He took off and was never heard from again. Arnold, now alone, had to carry on the hoax as planned. He collected another $150,000 that he was promised after the inspection of the mine was concluded. He invested these in stock, making his total $550,000, around $8 million today. But he sensed that his good luck was about to run out, so he took adequate measures, first moving his family from San Francisco back to Kentucky, and he was also getting ready to run himself. What ultimately exposed the hoax was a random encounter between Janin and a Yale-educated geologist, Clarence King. After a brief conversation with Janin, the geologist decided to see for himself the so-called diamond field that had provoked such a frenzy. A week or so later, after having gathered all the supplies, King and his team set off. When they finally arrived at the site that Janin had spoken of, they began examining the ground. The team found several deposits of precious stones, and while temporarily they were struck with the diamond fever that had tricked many, King began to notice the unnatural nature of the whole thing. The team stayed a few more days, and the more they investigated, the more convinced they became that the whole thing had been set up. That evening, King wrote to his boss in Washington and asked him to inquire about the company involved and to prevent any further transactions from being made. On the 10th of November, King arrived in San Francisco and met up with Janin. There he told him of his discoveries. The very next morning, Janin called the investors and gathered them all up. With all of them present, King read aloud a letter he had written, stating that the diamond fields were utterly valueless, and he went on to say that they had fallen victim to an unparalleled fraud. King then told the investors that he was going public with what he had stumbled upon in the mines and the fraud behind it all. The investors implored King to hold the story, to which King apparently responded, "There isn't enough money in the Bank of California to make me delay the publication a single hour." On the 26th of November, all of the headlines revealed the hoax that King unmasked, the Great Diamond Fiasco, the mammoth fraud exposed. As soon as it went public, reporters pressured the gullible investors for details as to what had occurred. Everyone was picked apart for being so easily fooled. The businessmen lost nearly $500,000, while Slack and Arnold were nowhere to be found. John Slack was assumed to have fled the country or to have died shortly after the visit with Janin to the fields. As for Arnold, it is said that he bought a property in his hometown in July of 1872 under his wife's name. Both Arnold and Slack were charged for fraud, but the investors didn't follow through with the accusations in order to avoid further embarrassment. Arnold did, however, have to settle in court for $150,000. In 1873, Arnold became a banker in Elizabethtown. However, in 1878, he got into a quarrel with a fellow banker. The incident grew violent, and he was left with a gunshot wound to the shoulder. He made a slow recovery, but 6 months later, he contracted pneumonia, and at the age of 49, he died. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Philip Arnold and the Diamond Hoax. I hope you enjoyed it. Any suggestions, please leave it in the comments or better in my email. That's all from me, and I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Lives. Thanks.